Hello! Today I will be talking about my top light novels and manhwas that I read for 2022, as well as the nonfiction books that I enjoyed for last year. All this coming in late, just been really busy with work, and yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I only have a few, that's why hopefully this will be a really quick video. I think most of the light novels and manhwas that I read for 2022 are here. I do have a few that I didn't really like, probably just like one or two or something like that, but yes. So the first book that I have here, the first books that I have here, this first part are the light novels. A lot of these light novels, I'm also reading the manhwas currently. Most of the time, the light novels are already finished before they get converted into manhwas. So I wanted to read the light novels in conjunction to reading the manhwas. First one is The Villain is a Marionette. This one, the manhwa for this book is really beautiful. Like, the art is amazing. I don't know how the artist has kept uploading very regularly, because I know that in the manhwa world, a lot of the artists have had to take breaks in between making the manhwas, and sometimes unexpected breaks because of how rigorous it is to make manhwa, because you're drawing a manhwa and releasing it every week. So it's brutal. I think that the artist has taken a few breaks in between, but not as bad as some people have. I think she has taken like one surprise hiatus in between, but I was so invested in the story, and I do read a little bit of like the spoilers, so it got me really interested into reading the light novel. And this light novel is available on Radish app, so it's essentially free. It's just one of those where you have to wait for the chapters to be available. And again, I really enjoyed this one. I really like layered characters, because in a lot of manhwas you always see, especially villainous characters, it's kind of like the same thing, where the character either went back in time or the main character gets transmigrated. I don't know if that's the right word. Transmigrated. I think that's a word. Into the novel that they were reading, into the body of the villainess. And so the story changes because they don't want to die, because villainesses die in the story. And usually what happens is that instead of falling for the main character or the main heroine, the heroes, the main leads, and the second main leads fall for the villainess instead. And it's usually those kinds of stories. You know, it's always like, oh, there was like a misconception of who this person really is, and this person is a really good person. But I really like when villainesses stay or like still become villainesses, or they don't essentially like change a lot of things. Especially for this one, Hannah, the main character, the reason why the title is The Villain is the Marionette is because she was used a lot by her younger brother for the fight to the throne. And again, she was a marionette, she was a puppet, she was used as a pawn, and she has lost a lot of people along the way. And the main character, I believe she was transmigrated. She refused to do that, and she wanted to survive and to live her own life. But the story, of course, changes as she gets to know more about the true situation of the main character. And I really love where the story went, although there are certain tropes in here that, you know, I've seen a lot, and I'm just kind of like, I wish it was a little bit different. But overall, I really enjoyed following Hannah as the main character. There are a lot of twists and turns in the story, which I really enjoy. Most manhwas and light novels are like that. A lot of like layers to the story, and the main premise isn't like the only premise that is happening throughout the story. Sometimes it changes like halfway through, because that's like essentially what the main character expects or was expecting to happen or expecting to do. But then, you know, the story progresses, it changes, and it goes in like different ways, and I really enjoy this one. And then the next one is What It Means to Be You. This one, a lot of people have dropped the manhwa because this is, I guess, a second chance story, and it talks a lot about self-harm and unaliving of oneself. It happens a lot to our heroine because she is in this loveless marriage to this man. She was a former princess, but the royalty, like the royal line, was abolished after the king, her father, was discovered to be, in a way, essentially like selling their kingdom. So the kingdom was in debt. And so to alleviate the debts, to pay off the debts, she had to marry this really wealthy businessman, but this businessman is half Kanak. There's racism going on in the story too, because again, a lot of prejudice against him because he's half foreigner. And because of this being a loveless marriage and the abuse that she was going through from his parents, and also essentially from him because he is really rash, it's already shown that he does care about her, but he doesn't know how to do it because he was also abused as a child. And so a lot of the readers hate him because of the way that he's treated the main character, and the main character has unalived herself. Instead of like dying, she switches body with a hero. Is there a love story? Again, there's a lot of ups and downs to this one, a lot of really heavy topics. Both of them experienced a lot of abuse. He experienced abuse from a very, very young age. She was being used by her brother as well. At the end of it, it's really just, for me, I was rooting for her mainly, because even though I forgave the husband, as the story went on. It's really just, I wanted her to be happy, and I know that happiness for her means being with him. So also the changes that she has gone through in the story, because she used to be like a really quiet, meek, obedient heroine, being a princess. She's used to just, in a way being a pawn, but she did love him, especially in the beginning. So like seeing her like really get to know herself more, especially outside of being a princess, seeing her grow, seeing her change, especially because there was a point in the story where she did separate from him, and like seeing just the way that she has changed and those years away from him and away from like the people that abused her and used her is just, heartwarming. So I really, really enjoyed this story, even though there's a lot of frustrating misunderstandings and miscommunications in the story. Still, overall, really enjoyed this one. So again, I'm currently still reading the manhwa. And then for the manhwas that I finished for this year, Lethal Romance. This manhwa is like really short, but it is a genre bending manhwa because it's essentially set in the manhwa world, in the comic world. So you have kids that are part of the romance, the contemporary romance genre, and then you have kids. It's like they're in separate schools. So kids in this school are the romance school, and you have the action school, and it's just every single chapter I would laugh out loud because of, there's like tropes that you see in romance manhwas, and then you see the tropes that you see in action manhwas, and they kind of like, the way that they clash and the way that they work together, because the main character of the romance school, the hero, falls for the heroine for the action school, and he's a chaebol type, and so his sister is like really protective of him, and so I think she essentially like works to combine the two schools together so that he can like woo the heroine. It's so fun. It's so freaking funny, because while the main storyline for the main romance school is going on, the main storyline for the action school is also going on, and it kind of like it intersects, and it's just like it's so funny. And it will always like talk about like, oh, as a main character, as a hero of the romance genre, he is blah 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 blah, or this happens blah 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 blah, and then as a main character, as a heroine for the action manhwa, she is blah blah blah, she is this, she is that, and it's just so funny. I enjoy this one so much. It's laugh out loud, but I also really enjoyed, essentially the romance between the two characters. Her story in her character, she doesn't have any romance in her story, so she doesn't really get him. To her, he was like a comrade, like a friend, and he's just like here with like the shiny, bright lights and then like the flowery parts of the story, and just like puppy eyes towards her. It's so funny. It's so funny. So I really enjoyed this manhwa. Like, I love this manhwa so much. Okay, now moving on to our nonfiction. I only have 3 for this year. The first one is Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds. I read the 2 iterations of the book. I haven't read the original, but the original is like, I think it was like 600, 700 pages. I do have it. I haven't read it, like I said. There are 2 books released that are for middle grade and like grade school kids. So I read those 2 books, and for someone who hasn't lived, I've only been in the US for 5 years, almost 5 years now. So I don't really know US history, let alone, Black history. So I was really intimidated by Stamped because it is in my TBR. And when I found out that they released like books for middle schoolers and grade schoolers, I decided I should start with those 2 first. So I learned so many things. Although the contents are essentially the same for the 2 books, you can really tell that there are more added like details in the middle school version of the book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I learned so many things, and I'm looking forward to finally reading like the full original version of the stories that I'll more. And then the next one is You Are More Than Magic. This is a book mainly for POC girls to find their voice and to use their voice. And this is one of those books, I think when I first reviewed this one, I mentioned that even though this is like, written for American POC girls, it's one of those books that I feel like is essential. Even I would be so grateful and thankful, and I would find it so helpful if I had read this book when I was in middle school as well. So yeah, it talks really about how to find your inner strength and to use that inner strength to find your voice and to use your voice. So I really enjoyed You Are More Than Magic. And then Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. A lot of people have been talking about this book. It is a nonfiction about Michelle Zauner, who is, I believe she is part of a band called Japanese Breakfast, if I'm remembering that correctly. She is Korean, and it is following her as she deals with the loss of her mom, and we get to know about her relationship with her mother growing up and her relationship with her culture as well, because again, she is Korean, but she is Korean American, and how it's mainly like the relationship that she has with her mom is also very closely tied to the relationship that she has with her culture. She learned how to cook some Korean food from her mom, and throughout the story it's like her just like recounting the relationship that she has had with her mom, and it talks a lot about, I feel like, generational trauma as well, and what it is having immigrant parents or an immigrant parent, and also again Korean culture. I really appreciated this book a lot. I feel like the journey that we follow Michelle in was really important, like just listening and hearing her story. Even though I'm an immigrant myself, I'm not a daughter of an immigrant, but seeing that story, I feel like, and hearing that story from her is really, really important to read about, to learn about, because that's a person's experience that is different from my own, but also similar to what I experienced as a POC. But yeah, I really appreciated that book. So those are all my favorites, my top light novels, manhwas, and nonfiction for 2022. I will be having honorable mention of these as well. That is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I will see you on my next one.